To give some context, my wife, Emma, 31, and I, 33, have been together for 8 years and married for 6. Before diving into this, thank you for taking the time to read my account. I must warn you, though, my thoughts might come across as scattered since I've barely slept in days. My head's been spinning like a carousel that just won't stop. Emma recently went on a work trip abroad with a few of her colleagues. For the first couple of days, she stayed in a hotel and, despite her busy schedule, made sure to FaceTime me every evening. Everything seemed normal, routine even, but on the third day, things started to feel off. Her team moved to a different location to collaborate on a big project with local workers. Understandably, it was a stressful day, and she barely messaged me. Around 11 p.m. their time, she finally wrote, saying she was heading to the sauna with Nina, her female colleague, who she mentioned earlier was her roommate. Emma explained that the sauna was part of the compound they were staying at, and it was a common practice in that country. Still, it struck me as odd. Why go so late after such an exhausting day? About 2.5 hours later, at 1:30 a.m., she messaged again. I'm going to sleep. Love you. I'll write when I wake up. No mention of being too tired for a call. No explanation of how those 2.5 hours had passed. Nothing. This wasn't like her. I'm not one to control her every move, but she usually keeps me in the loop, and this sudden coldness felt completely out of character. It gave me a gnawing, gut-wrenching feeling that something was wrong. You see, my gut feelings aren't random. They've proven to be right more often than not, and I've learned to trust them. My suspicion had been quietly brewing since she left, but this moment really set my alarm bells ringing. I needed to know what was going on. Luckily, or unluckily, depending on how you look at it, Emma had left her laptop at home, and it was synced to her messages. I could see conversations in real time. Yes, it's an invasion of privacy, but desperation does strange things to people. That's when I noticed a message thread with her coworker, Lucas. The last thing she had sent him was a peculiar heart with a bandage emoji. An emoji I'd never even seen before, let alone understood. What could it mean? Why send it to him at the same time she told me she was going to sleep? While I was still trying to make sense of that, I left her laptop open as I got ready for bed. Suddenly, I saw another message pop up. Emma had written to Lucas, "Come to room 3. At this point, my heart was pounding in my chest. My mind raced with every possible scenario. Could there be an innocent explanation? Maybe they were meeting for work-related reasons. Or perhaps Lucas was going through something and needed a friend. But why just him? Why so cryptic? And if it were about Nina, why wouldn't Nina message him directly? My thoughts spiraled further. Was she even staying in the same room with Nina like she said? Lucas's reply came an hour later. Going there. His message stayed unread, which made me hope Emma had fallen asleep, and this might all be a misunderstanding. But for the next 7 hours, the message remained unopened. I forced myself to stay awake, hoping to catch any other developments, but nothing happened. And then, like a gut punch, I watched the entire thread between Emma and Lucas get deleted. This shattered any remaining illusions of innocence. An hour after the deletion, Emma messaged another coworker, saying she had Lucas's phone and to let him know. That was it. No further communication between them all day. The reason my gut had been uneasy the entire trip traces back to an incident 2 weeks before she left. Emma, a mutual friend, and I had gone out for drinks with her colleagues. That's when I first met Lucas. While Emma had spoken about her coworkers before, she rarely mentioned him. It made sense as they didn't work directly together, or so I thought. At the bar, I noticed Emma acting differently around Lucas compared to everyone else. She teased him by snatching something from his hand and tucking it into her pocket. The way she smiled and laughed with him was unusual. Then outside, they stood close and she touched his arm, just a second too long to feel platonic. Moments later, they hugged. I was livid. Emma had barely shown me any affection all week, yet here she was being so touchy with Lucas. When we got home, I told her how I felt. She exploded, accusing me of being controlling and dramatic. In the heat of the moment, she packed a bag, claiming she'd go stay at a hotel. It was late, and no hotel would take her in, so I called her bluff. She pretended to leave, but never actually did. I know because I didn't hear the door downstairs close. Later that night, I checked her iPad, logged into her Instagram, desperate to understand what was happening. I saw her messaging another man, making plans to meet for drinks. She denied it at first, then tried to twist the story, saying I was stressing her out and doubting her without cause. She cried uncontrollably, and I felt guilty. I dropped the subject to keep the peace. The rest of the week before her trip was perfect. We went on dates, had great sex, and made plans to discuss everything once she returned. But now, with these recent events, those moments felt tainted. Even her chats with Lucas on the plane seemed overly friendly. They had purposely moved seats to sit together, which didn't happen by accident. Last night, when Emma finally called me from her hotel, something seemed off again. Her neck and chest were red, like how her skin looks when we make out and my beard rubs against her. When I asked, she acted clueless, blaming her scarf. But the redness was on one side and went far lower than a scarf would rub. I didn't press her because I didn't want her to suspect I was catching on. I still needed hard evidence. So here I am, exhausted, confused, and reeling from this whirlwind of suspicion. She told me she'd write whenever she could, assuring me that if she didn't, it wasn't because she was doing anything suspicious. Instead, it was just difficult balancing her responsibilities abroad with staying in touch with me. Still, she added, it's not because of what you might be thinking. Her words didn't bring me much comfort. If you stuck with me this far, thank you. Seriously, thank you. My mind has been spinning endlessly these past few days, and I've been questioning everything. Divorce has been constantly on my mind, even though it's not a step I ever thought I'd consider. We had plans, big ones. Buying a house, starting a family next year. Even if nothing physical happened, she's already betrayed my trust by lying about going to bed and then inviting Lucas to her room. That alone is hard to stomach. And even if I set that aside, she betrayed me again by continuing a close relationship with Lucas, despite knowing how uncomfortable it made me. It's not just about me. She's risking so much. Her career could be at stake too. I'm sure her coworkers must be suspicious by now. But for me, the hardest part is realizing I can't live my life constantly dissecting every little thing she does, looking for signs of infidelity. That's no way to live. A couple of days ago, I noticed symmetrical bruises on her thighs, one she couldn't explain. I know for a fact I didn't cause them. And yet, here I am, feeling like I have to investigate every mark, every word, every action. I hate the position I'm in. I feel forced to snoop, but at the same time, I know the evidence I have might not hold up as grounds for divorce. It's not enough. It's all too circumstantial. Our finances are separate for logistical reasons that would take too long to explain, and the car is in her name. If I bring up divorce now, I'm worried she'll move the money or do something drastic, leaving me to start over from scratch. And yet, my heart is breaking because I love her so much. She's the love of my life, my soulmate. But at the same time, it feels like the person I fell in love with is gone, vanished in just a matter of days. I don't know what to do next. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm imagining all of this? Edit 1. She's suddenly being very flirtatious with me over text, something she hasn't done in weeks. Edit 2. I forgot to mention that Emma has been working from home since joining this company in January. She's only met her coworkers in person maybe a dozen times. Edit 3. There haven't been any new apps downloaded on her devices that I can see, but it occurred to me that they use Slack for work. It's far more convenient and discreet than downloading a separate app to communicate. Edit 4. She called me again. She's now back at the original hotel, working from the office all day. One of the first things she mentioned was that her arm was bruised, though she doesn't know how it happened. She guessed it might have happened at the previous location. When she said, "I'm all bruised up," well, not all bruised, just this one. It struck me as strange. The lighting was poor, so I couldn't see the bruise on camera. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry it took so long to update you all. My last post got filtered, and I wasn't able to share what's been going on. Since my previous update, things have been a roller coaster. Emma and I kept going back and forth. I tried pressing for details, but she kept denying everything. Then came the tears, her breaking down, apologizing, admitting she lied, and calling herself a piece of garbage. She begged me to give us another chance and promised she'd do anything to fix things. Meanwhile, I've been losing weight from the stress, down 2 bell holes in just a week. Silver lining, I guess. I might end up with a six-pack after all this. Monday, I decided I needed a break for self-care. I took a drive to a small village nearby, drawn in by the smell of wood-fired bread and homemade food. I found a quaint little place with just 2 tables inside. At one table, 3 older women were leisurely eating and chatting. A neighbor stopped by to say hello, and their warm, simple interactions made me smile for the first time in what felt like forever. It reminded me how beautiful and uncomplicated life can be. Afterward, I treated myself to a massage. It was the most transformative one I've ever had. The knot that had been sitting in my stomach for days finally loosened, and for the first time, my mind felt clearer. When I got back to the hotel, I saw that Emma had sent me an email earlier with a detailed timeline of her day. I hadn't read it yet, so I sat at the bar, ordered a virgin piña colada, no alcohol. I needed my mind sharp, and opened the email. It was incredibly detailed, listing every Uber ride she took, every bathroom break, and every insignificant detail of her day. But when it came to the things that mattered, the real issues, they were just as vague and inconclusive as before. Somehow, Emma couldn't seem to recall the exact time she had called me or told me she was going to bed. Details that are easily verifiable. It became painfully clear at this point that there was no real way back from this. Despite knowing that, I still tried. I sent her an email with 3 different versions of events that gradually escalated in terms of the responsibility she'd have to take for what happened. Her response? She brushed it off, saying, "These are just the things I remember," while conveniently remembering new details later. I suggested meeting her in person the following day, Tuesday, and asked for her best friend to join us for both emotional support and as a witness. The no-contact idea was difficult to maintain. We kept talking, and I kept pressing for explanations. When I asked why Nina, her supposed roommate, would open the door for Lucas without prior communication, she said Nina and Lucas claimed she had called him. She even added that Nina was flirting with Lucas, sitting on his lap at the sauna, and maybe Nina thought he was there for her. This made little sense to me, but it only added to the chaos. Desperate for clarity, I took a drastic step. During an anti-harassment training at work, I realized how Emma's narrative could align with a potential case of misconduct if Lucas had entered her room uninvited and Nina had let him in. I mentioned this to Emma, saying it would need to be investigated if true. This assertion made her back off a little from her desperate apologies and pleading. Later, Emma sent me a screenshot of a message she had sent to Nina. It read, "I'm sorry to do this, but I need your answer about something." Nina replied that she was unavailable at the moment. Moments after that, Emma sent me another screenshot showing Nina's response. "I was shocked by your husband's call, and you involving me in something I have no relation to at all. Please stop it." When I read that, I broke down in tears. I believe Emma sent me these screenshots as part of a how dare you strategy before it could sink in for me what was really happening. I calmly told Emma that yes, I had spoken to Nina, and that's why I had asked Emma to keep Nina out of it. Emma promised not to involve Nina again. Deep down, though, I knew that meeting her in person would be emotionally draining. Still, I wanted to tell her face-to-face how she had made me feel and give her one last chance to be honest. Before our meeting, I wrote everything down in a text. I knew my emotions might cloud my memory, and if I spoke from the heart alone, I might end up being harsher than intended. In the message, I zoomed out, explaining the full extent of the damage her actions had caused, the pain they inflicted, and the lasting scars they'd leave behind. When we finally met, Emma stayed quiet, but her friend remained, speaking to me afterward. Her friend surprised me by not defending Emma's actions. Instead, she asked, "Has she lied to you like this before?" I thought she was going to argue that this was out of character, but no, she told me she was well aware of how good Emma was at lying. Her friend even speculated about where Emma's deceitfulness might stem from, referencing Emma's interest in self-development. I shared my own story about a past relationship and why I could never tolerate dishonesty again. Her friend revealed that Emma had given her 2 entirely different versions of the events surrounding Lucas, and that revelation broke me. I was grateful for her honesty and her willingness to support Emma while still acknowledging the truth. That night, Emma sent me a flurry of texts. She mentioned deleting things, asked me to send documents to her parents, and requested my bank account information so she could transfer funds. Later, she claimed she'd talked to my lawyers, but I couldn't handle processing all her messages at once. I told her I'd read them the next day. The day after, Emma emailed me, recounting our history together and every point at which she felt she had failed me. She claimed she wasn't enough for me and wrote with such regret that I had to fight back tears as I read it at a coffee shop. She invited me to join a shared iCloud album titled Love, but I haven't accepted it. I finally understood why maintaining no contact is crucial. I need to stay grounded and not let myself get swayed by her words or gestures. I read through her texts with Lucas often, not because it's healthy, but because it's my way of reminding myself that this all really happened. I need those reminders to stay firm in my decision. What I went through was real, just as her regret may be real now, but it doesn't erase the betrayal. I know I once said I didn't care about the truth anymore, but the reality is that it still haunts me. Random memories pop into my head, sending me spiraling down rabbit holes. This time, though, I think I've uncovered something significant. You might remember from my earlier account the strange exchange between Emma and Lucas about the book and gum. At the time, I thought their conversation was coded and didn't make much sense. Here's a refresher. Where's your book? Is it there? Maybe you can deliver it to my room. Bad idea. I said you can. The book is here already. Glad you got it already. Unless you want to give the other book. I think your gum is still here. Maybe I need some gum now. At first, I dismissed this as meaningless small talk. But now, I'm convinced it wasn't about a book or gum at all. Emma claimed Lucas went to her room the night before to retrieve a book he'd left there. She said he was only there for 5 minutes. But if that's true, why would they talk about the book being already here the next day? And why would she say, I think your gum is still here? None of it adds up. Here's what I now believe. There never was a book. It was an excuse Lucas used to go to her room that night. The next day, Emma teased him with phrases like, where's your book? To downplay the real reason he'd been there. The gum was a similar ploy, something trivial to distract from the truth. When Lucas was caught leaving her room empty-handed, the excuse became looking for his book. This realization explains 2 key things. The red marks on Emma's neck and chest, marks consistent with intimacy, and the lack of messages between them from that night. It also aligns with Emma's later admission that Lucas stayed longer than she initially claimed and that they both fell asleep on the bed. Emma has started parroting words I used to describe her behavior. Betrayal, gaslighting, manipulation, as if repeating them will make her remorse seem genuine. But her actions speak louder. Even now, she denies any physical cheating. She suggested therapy, sleeping in separate rooms, and other steps to fix things. But I can't shake the feeling that her remorse is more performative than genuine. It felt cathartic to tell Emma in person that we were separating, though I'm certain her reaction was as explosive as it was partly because she got caught and partly because of how I delivered the news. After she left, I broke down in tears, venting to her friend and even asking if I'd been too harsh. As for the truth about whether there had been sex or kissing, Emma stuck to her denials. Yet, she kept sending me emails, full of retellings from our past, sprinkled with inside jokes and updates about her work. I didn't reply. This morning, I noticed her emails were getting shorter and less detailed, which felt like a relief. I told her plainly, if she ever wants to share the whole truth, my inbox is open, but until then, we're keeping things strictly about logistics. Later, Emma admitted something new. On the 3rd night, Lucas stayed in her room for longer than 30 minutes. They fell asleep together, but she woke him up at some point and asked him to leave. Her claim was that this was the full truth, and that she had nothing left to hide. It felt like just another round of trickle truth, revealing bits only when she felt cornered. Frustrated, I caved and sent her a short, angry reply. I told her off in anger, and I can't even say I regret it. In the meantime, I began piecing together the events of the 2nd night, using everything Emma had told me, along with my own deductions. The gaps I filled felt damning, though they still didn't give me full closure. So I updated my post with what I had gathered so far. After sending Emma that final angry email, I thought I'd finally stick to no contact. The next day, she went to meet with my lawyer. Later, she sent a couple more emotional emails about how she felt and everything she was losing. That night, I decided to go out with friends, hoping to distract myself. I drank too much, ended up at a club, and within 10 minutes had a panic attack. I left immediately and went home, overwhelmed by everything. When I finally fell asleep, I had a vivid dream. In it, Emma and I were together. We were crying, and I kept asking her for the truth, but she wouldn't tell me. I woke up crushed, lying in bed for 15 minutes, consumed by a sadness so heavy I couldn't move. I don't think I've ever felt such deep disappointment and heartbreak all at once. In my despair, I broke no contact again. I emailed Emma, telling her about the dream and how much I missed her. I confessed that I felt shattered because I believed she loved me. Yet she lied, manipulated me, and gaslit me. My mind couldn't reconcile the Emma I loved with the one who did this to me. I told her I hoped she found what she was looking for, whether it was with Lucas or someone else. I wished her a beautiful life, with a home and the children she always dreamed of and a successful career. I told her I didn't hate her. In fact, I loved her deeply. But that love was exactly why we couldn't be together. I couldn't risk making myself vulnerable again, only to be hurt and lied to once more. It's a kind of pain I simply can't endure again. I ended the email by vowing to stay away from alcohol because the emotional toll wasn't worth it. Emma replied, asking to meet in person so she could tell me the truth. I agreed. She had traveled to another city where her best friend lived, and she needed to take a train back and book a hotel for the night. She asked me to meet her in her hotel room. I knew it was a terrible idea, but I also knew that a public setting wouldn't allow us to have the kind of raw, unfiltered conversation we needed. I trusted myself to maintain boundaries and keep things safe, so I reluctantly agreed. By now, it should be clear that I have a tendency to touch the stove to see if it's still hot. I wasn't under any illusions. I knew I wasn't going to take her back. At this point, there was nothing she could say that would change how I felt or undo the damage. Still, I hoped, deep down, that she'd offer me some clarity, some truth that would finally allow me to move forward. In the lead-up to our meeting, my lawyer emailed me with notes from their earlier conversation. Apparently, Emma was fixated on knowing exactly what I knew. This struck me as odd and further solidified my belief that she was still hiding something. Before entering the hotel, I took precautions. I started a video recording on my phone and kept an audio recorder in my jacket pocket. I wanted to have proof of where I was, what was said, and what happened after the meeting. Every step of my day was accounted for, and I felt prepared for whatever might come. When I arrived at the hotel room, I walked into that hotel room knowing this was Emma's moment to finally tell me the truth. I made it clear, if she raised her voice, lied, or tried to manipulate me, I would leave, and she'd never hear from me again. She started recounting her days in meticulous detail, but I cut her off, telling her I was only interested in the parts involving Lucas. As she spoke, she locked eyes with me, barely blinking, and after every sentence, she paused, as if trying to gauge my reaction. I asked her a few pointed questions, and her answers started contradicting things she'd said before. Frustrated, I pushed harder, but then I realized it wasn't worth it. There were gaps in her story I couldn't verify anyway. Instead of walking out right then, I told her we'd circle back to those inconsistencies later. When she got to the final night, I pressed her about the logistics. How does someone end up falling asleep in someone else's bed? She said the room was cold, so they sat on the bed talking. I asked her what her intentions were when she invited him to her room. She claimed it was just a talk because neither of them could sleep, a fact she couldn't possibly know about him beforehand. She insisted that once she fell asleep, he was supposed to leave, and they'd both go to sleep separately. I asked her if she was 100% certain about this version of events. She said yes. That was it for me. I said goodbye, told her my lawyers would be in touch, and left the hotel without looking back. As I walked away, I felt disgusted. From her earlier messages, I knew she had invited Lucas to her room under the guise of just sleeping and not causing trouble, which sounded more flirtatious than serious. That confirmation sealed it for me. Emma wasn't just lying. She was manipulative on a level I hadn't fully grasped until now. She had traveled to my city, bought train tickets, booked a hotel room, all of it just to gaslight me in person one last time. It was worse than I had imagined, and I wanted nothing more than to put as much distance between us as possible. Later that evening, Emma sent me an email saying she had a gift for our cat and asking me to come back. I ignored it. Hours later, she sent another email admitting the truth, at least a partial version of it. She confessed she had invited Lucas to her room specifically to sleep in her bed. She claimed she had called him, though I knew from their text that it was actually a message. She didn't want to sleep alone, but she also insisted that there was no kissing or sex. They talked, cuddled, and fell asleep. At some point, the alcohol wore off, or guilt consumed her. She wasn't sure, and she woke him up and asked him to leave. Here's the kicker. She admitted that she asked Lucas to delete all their messages from his phone. According to her, neither of them could fully remember what they wrote. But I had the full conversation saved, and it painted a very different picture. When I confronted her about her communication with Lucas after I announced the divorce, I saw messages where he told her to call the police or fire department to get back into the house, insisting I couldn't do this to her. The level of entitlement in those messages made me feel even more disgusted. I woke up feeling surprisingly relieved. There's still a tiny knot in my stomach, but my sadness and lingering passion for her have been replaced by anger. Anger is easier to handle. It fuels me to move forward, to let go, and to see Emma for what she truly is, a facade. I finally realized how colossal of a bullet I've dodged. For the first time, I might even call this closure. After Emma's confession, she went silent for longer than she had at any point in the last week and a half. My gut told me she was up to something, and sure enough, I received an email later that day. Its tone was dramatic, manipulative, and designed to make me feel guilty. It's surreal how quickly you got a lawyer, packed my belongings, and decided to end 8 years together. It makes me think you've been planning this for a long time. How quickly everyone turned their backs on me. Your friends, your family, even you. Have I not given all of myself to you for 8 years? Have I not forgiven you for deceiving, lying, and hurting me? Have I not loved and supported everyone in your life? Have I been asleep for the last 8 years while you've been plotting to throw me out? Was I buying Christmas gifts for your family while you were planning to lock me out? Who am I if no one loves me, and I've sacrificed everything for this? The email was clearly crafted to justify her actions to herself and her family, while painting me as the villain. It was an attempt to elicit a response, but I refused to engage. I saw it for what it was: manipulation. In one of her emails, Emma mentioned that her brother knew about her infidelity and that she had no one left to support her except a few close friends. I found this odd because her brother messaged me separately, offering his support. He said he was there for me, which didn't align with the idea that he knew the whole truth. So I called him. It turns out Emma had only told him a watered-down version of the story. According to her, I had seen some messages and thought she cheated, so I kicked her out of the house. She had turned me into the insecure, jealous husband acting on a baseless hunch. I explained to her brother that she had admitted to cheating, though I spared him the details. He was shocked, but appreciated the clarity. Not long after, Emma sent me another email. I know you talked to my brother. My mom might call you, because she won't leave me alone. Please don't answer. She knows something is wrong, but not the full details yet. It's unfair for you to involve my family. Our issues are private until I decide otherwise. Let's stop wreaking havoc in each other's lives. It was yet another attempt to control the narrative. She apologized for writing to my sister in a moment of distress, but her tone was more focused on self-preservation than accountability. I see now how blind I was to Emma's true nature. Her lies, manipulations, and smear campaigns were all designed to protect herself, even at the cost of my reputation and emotional well-being. I still have moments where I doubt myself, but the evidence speaks for itself. This chapter of my life is closing, and I'm determined to move forward. I was nervous about my soon-to-be ex-wife, Emma, coming across my posts online, considering how much attention they'd gained. But judging by her emails, she likely hadn't found them. Her messages have been consistent, at least for her. She hasn't mentioned any details that could have only come from reading my posts. As soon as I suspected her infidelity on the first night she invited Lucas to her room, I started searching for a private investigator, PI. It wasn't easy, being in a foreign country and needing someone reliable on short notice. Most PIs didn't respond. One found the situation too complicated, but finally, a guy with a less than reassuring website agreed. I felt like I was setting myself up to be ripped off, but I had no other options. Since following her all day would have been too expensive and wouldn't give me new information, I proposed a specific plan. If she invited Lucas to her room again, the PI could record what happened from outside. There was no need for bugging or breaking into rooms, just observing. He agreed, but only after I paid a significant amount up front. On the second night, I gave him a heads up, but nothing happened. Emma and Lucas didn't exchange messages, so we didn't proceed. I didn't want to risk blowing my cover. However, on the third night, Emma made it easy. After hanging out in the lobby with coworkers for a while, she went up to her room and started messaging Lucas. This time, I knew it was game on. When Lucas told her to open the door, the PI went into action. After that, I heard nothing from him. He didn't respond to my messages or calls, and I thought I'd been scammed. Days passed with no updates, and I started to feel like an idiot for trusting him. Then, this morning, the PI reached out, apologizing for the delay. He claimed his phone had issues and he'd lost his contacts. After recovering them, he emailed me a long audio recording from that night. I couldn't bring myself to listen to most of it. The thought of hearing their voices together was too much. I only listened to a specific timestamp, the PI noted. Turning up the volume, I could faintly hear what I dreaded. They were trying to keep quiet because of coworkers next door, but the truth was undeniable. They had slept together. My worst fears had been confirmed. Not from Emma, but from the audio. It's ironic. I had prayed to hear the truth from Emma herself, thinking it would hurt less. Instead, I got the truth in the most devastating way imaginable. Emma sent me a long email that feels honest yet strangely off. For the first time, she doesn't try to blame me or spin the narrative. Instead, she repeatedly calls herself a narcissist, which is new. It seems like she's read about narcissistic traits and is now framing everything she's done through that lens. Here's what she wrote. I know you don't love me anymore, but I still love you. I'll always love you. You were the biggest part of my life. No one knows me like you do, and no one ever will. You've seen my ugly sides, but you've also seen the beautiful ones. The ugly overshadows the beautiful now, but the beautiful is still there. You've supported me through everything, when I was lost, scared, and unsure of my place in the world. You found me, guided me, and gave me a home. The only home I've ever known has been with you. You taught me how to love myself, work hard, and go after what I want. We built so much together, businesses, careers, a life, all from scratch. We were an unmatched team, but I lost sight of that. I got wrapped up in seeking validation, in feeling worthy in someone else's eyes. I've struggled with this my whole life. My family only cares about appearances, and I've never believed I'm good enough. My confidence is a mask. I send gifts to friends, overly praise them, and make myself available to everyone to prove I'm a good person. But it's all about validation. I wanted people to believe I was enough because I couldn't believe it myself. You're right. I didn't ask for help when I was struggling. I expected you to read my mind, to see the signs so I wouldn't have to admit my weakness. I was afraid you'd think less of me. I sought validation elsewhere instead. Lucas made me feel interesting, beautiful, and smart, even if only temporarily. It didn't work. No one can make me feel those things except you. No one ever will. It's hard to believe anything I say now, and I don't blame you. I've lost all credibility, and I hate myself for that. But I still love you. I'm sorry for everything. The email was bittersweet. On the one hand, it felt like the first time she acknowledged the depth of what she'd done without gaslighting or shifting the blame. On the other hand, it felt rehearsed, like she was trying to control how I'd remember her. Her framing of narcissism seemed like a convenient way to explain her actions without fully taking responsibility. I didn't reply and have no intention of breaking no contact. The email gave me some closure because it didn't feel as delusional as her earlier messages, but it's not enough to undo the damage. I'm moving forward. I feel a strange sense of relief today. The anger that replaced my sadness is still there, but it's driving me to rebuild my life. I see Emma now for who she truly is, and I realize how lucky I am to be getting out of this. As painful as it's been, I've finally reached a point where I can let go of the person I thought she was and focus on the person I want to become. At one point, Emma emailed me claiming she now understood that divorce was the only solution after everything that had happened. She suggested we didn't need lawyers and could handle everything ourselves. I agreed, once again outlining my requests. She shifted the conversation, saying she wanted us to be cordial and for me to be kind, but never actually specified what she wanted from the negotiation. When she did ask how I arrived at the numbers I was asking for, I provided undeniable proof that I was actually requesting far less than I could have considering my financial and non-monetary contributions. Unsurprisingly, she never brought it up again. Days later, one of Emma's coworkers from the trip reached out to me. He asked if I wanted to meet in person or record our conversation, though he admitted he didn't know the legal implications. It immediately seemed suspicious, but I agreed to talk over the phone. I avoided asking him about specific days to avoid tipping my hand about what I already knew. Eventually, though, he volunteered some vague details. He claimed it was very unlikely anything happened because he, Lucas, and another guy were always together, except for the night they went to the sauna. Afterward, Lucas supposedly only went to Emma's room for 3 minutes to check if they still wanted to hang out. This coworker rambled for 20 minutes, during which I said very little. For some reason, I mentioned Emma's recent self-deletion attempts and how I suspected they might be for attention. A few hours later, I received a furious email from Emma, accusing me of downplaying her struggles. All her subsequent emails were variations of the same. She felt worthless, was a horrible person, and didn't think she could survive much longer. Emma has an upcoming visa renewal appointment, about a month and a half away, and it's the only thing standing between the divorce being finalized. I had to write all of this out to share with you, because I feel like I'm gaslighting myself. At times, I pity her, and the thought of letting her come back to the house so she can get help crosses my mind. But then all the reasons why that's impossible hit me like a freight train. This journey has been anything but easy. It's been a roller coaster, but I believe I'm making progress, both personally and in moving toward finalizing our separation. If these events had occurred earlier in the process, I'm not sure how I would have handled them. To anyone else struggling, stay strong. It gets better. I am genuinely thankful Emma cheated. My previous updates rarely ended on a positive note, so here's something different. After my last post, Emma continued sending emails filled with excuses and thinly veiled threats. At one point, she even sent me recordings of her therapy sessions, without her therapist's consent. My curiosity got the better of me, so I listened. Predictably, these sessions were filled with the same blame-shifting, victim-playing, and gaslighting I'd heard from her before. It felt like she wanted me to interpret her confessions for her, sparing her from having to take full responsibility. One weekend, she didn't write at all. She'd always written more on weekends, so I spent the time waiting for an email that never came. By the following weekend, I began to feel a profound sense of relief. It was as if a massive weight had been lifted. That Saturday morning, while tidying up the house, I had the sudden impulse to listen to her most recent therapy recording. I listened to the full hour. Again, it was more of the same, self-pity and manipulation, until in the final minutes, she said, "You know what? Forget him." I burst out laughing. "Well, forget you," I said aloud. The weight I'd been carrying completely disappeared. That same day, I downloaded a dating app, more out of curiosity than intention. Later, a friend asked about my dating life, and I told them I wasn't looking for anything serious and would probably stay single for the rest of the year. I quickly grew tired of the small talk and superficial interactions on the app. But the next day, I matched with someone who caught my attention. After exchanging only a handful of messages, we agreed to meet. I drove an hour to see her, and the connection was instant. What started as a quick drink turned into dinner, then drinks at a bar until it closed. By the end of the night, we kissed and made plans for another date. Fast forward to our 5th date, and we were completely smitten. I told her everything about Emma, my past, and what I'd been through. She shared her own experiences. She'd recently come out of a relationship too. We both wondered if this was a rebound or an overcorrection, but after honest reflection, we concluded that we'd done the healing we needed. We weren't looking for something serious, but the connection felt too right to ignore. On our last day together during one of my visits, she asked me to move to her country. We'd spent only 5 days together at that point, but I didn't hesitate for a second. That was 2.5 months ago. Now we've been living together for 3 weeks, and every single day confirms what we felt from the start. Our similarities, shared values, and connection are almost uncanny. It's as if we've lived parallel lives in separate cultures, only to find each other now. I am so thankful Emma cheated because that relationship was never meant to work. Without her betrayal, I wouldn't have met someone who feels like my true match. For anyone reading this and struggling with infidelity or heartbreak, know that there's hope. Sometimes endings lead to better beginnings.